Emily's hands trembled as she adjusted the veil that belonged to her sister. 3 hours ago, she was checking in guests at the Grandview Hotel's front desk. Now she stood in a white dress 2 sizes too big, about to marry a man she'd never met. Rebecca had vanished, leaving behind a note, a wedding, and a family drowning in debt. The music began. Emily took a breath. She didn't know that walking down that aisle would lead her into a web of lies, so complex that even she would question which sister was truly the victim and which one was the villain.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing.
The fluorescent lights of the Grandview Hotel lobby hummed their usual monotonous tune as Emily processed the check-in for a tired businessman. Her fingers moved automatically across the keyboard, eyes occasionally glancing at the clock. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until her shift ended. 13 minutes until she could take off these uncomfortable heels and walk the 6 blocks to her studio apartment. The businessman thanked her and wheeled his luggage toward the elevator. Emily exhaled, allowing herself a moment to rest her elbows on the polished marble counter. The lobby was empty now, just the way she preferred it during these late shifts. No complaints about room temperature, no questions about breakfast hours, just silence and the distant sound of traffic outside. Her phone vibrated. Mom. Calling at midnight was unusual, but with Rebecca's wedding tomorrow, Emily assumed it was last-minute coordination. Maybe they needed her to pick up something on her way to the venue in the morning. She answered. What came through the speaker made her blood freeze. Her mother's voice was shrill, panicked, words tumbling over each other in a way Emily had never heard before. Rebecca was gone. Not just late. Gone. Her room was empty, drawers ransacked, suitcases missing. On the dresser lay a note in Rebecca's elegant handwriting that said simply, I can't do this. I'm sorry. Emily's mind went blank. Rebecca had been planning this wedding for 8 months. The engagement to Daniel Whitmore had been the talk of their small social circle. Daniel came from old money, the kind that built hospitals and had wings of museums named after them. Her sister had been glowing for months, showing off her ring, talking about the honeymoon in the Maldives, the house Daniel bought them in Riverside Heights. And now, 3 hours before the ceremony, Rebecca had vanished. Her mother's next words cut through the fog. The Whitmore family had already paid a substantial sum to Emily's family as part of the traditional arrangement, money that her parents had immediately used to pay off a decade of accumulated debt and her father's medical bills from his stroke 2 years ago. If the wedding didn't happen, they would have to return money they no longer had. They would be ruined, possibly face legal action. She listened as her mother sobbed, as her father's weak voice came on the line begging. She listened as they explained what they needed her to do. She needed to take Rebecca's place. The request was insane, impossible. This was real life, not some drama on television. People didn't just substitute brides. Daniel would notice. His family would notice. The entire plan was absurd. But her mother kept talking. Rebecca and Emily looked similar enough. People always said so. Same height, same build, same dark hair, though Emily wore hers shorter. With makeup and the veil, in the chaos of a wedding, maybe no one would look too closely. Daniel had been so busy with work, he'd only met Rebecca a few times during their brief courtship. Most of their relationship had been long distance, conducted through phone calls and video chats while Daniel managed his company's expansion. Her parents had a photograph of Daniel from the engagement party. They would send it to Emily right away so she could at least know what her husband looked like. Husband. Emily's throat tightened. She had never even had a serious boyfriend. She'd been too busy working double shifts to help support her parents, too focused on eventually saving enough to maybe go back to school. Romance had always been something that happened to other people, to people like Rebecca who knew how to smile the right way and say the right things. Her mother was still pleading. Her father was coughing in the background, the same wet cough he'd had since the stroke. Emily thought about the medical bills, the collectors who used to call 3 times a day, the look of relief on her father's face when he told her the debt was finally cleared. She thought about Rebecca, wherever she was, running toward whatever life she'd chosen that was worth destroying everyone else's. The businessman returned to the desk, sheepish, explaining he'd forgotten to ask about the Wi-Fi password. Emily gave it to him automatically, her mind somewhere else entirely. When he left, she looked at the clock again. Midnight. She told her mother she would come. The drive to her parents' house took 20 minutes. Emily moved through it in a daze, her beat-up sedan rattling at every stoplight. She kept expecting to wake up, for this to be some stress-induced dream brought on by too many late shifts. But when she arrived, the chaos was real. Her mother's makeup was smeared from crying. Her father sat in his wheelchair, looking smaller than Emily had ever seen him. And there on the bed was the dress. Ivory silk, delicate lace, thousands of tiny pearls sewn into the bodice. It was the most beautiful thing Emily had ever seen. Her mother helped her into it. The dress was indeed too big. Rebecca had always been slightly curvier, but pins and a sash would make it work. As her mother styled her hair, pinning and curling it into an elaborate updo identical to the one Rebecca had practiced a dozen times, Emily stared at herself in the mirror. She looked like a bride. She looked like her sister. She looked like someone about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Her mother explained what little she knew about Daniel. 32 years old, CEO of Whitmore Industries, a manufacturing company his grandfather had founded. Reserved, quiet, dignified. He'd met Rebecca at a charity gala where Rebecca had been working as an event coordinator. According to Rebecca, he'd been charmed by her immediately and had proposed within 4 months. Emily tried to picture him. The photograph showed a tall man in a well-cut suit, dark hair styled back, a serious expression. Handsome in an intimidating way. He looked like he belonged in a different world than Emily's. And in a few hours, she would be his wife. The ceremony was scheduled for 8 a.m. at the Cathedral of St. Michael, followed by a small reception for immediate family only at the Whitmore estate. The rest of the celebration had been postponed due to Daniel's business commitments, a mercy now that Emily wouldn't have to maintain this charade in front of hundreds of guests. At 6 a.m., they left for the cathedral. Emily's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her mother held them, whispering assurances that everything would be fine, that this was just temporary, that they would figure something out once the immediate crisis passed. But as Emily walked into the cathedral's preparation room, as the veil was placed over her face, as the music began, and she was ushered toward the closed doors that led to the aisle, she knew nothing about the situation was temporary. The doors opened. The aisle stretched before her like a pathway to another dimension. The cathedral was intimate, maybe 30 people in the pews, all strangers, turning to look at her. At the far end, beside the priest, stood Daniel Whitmore.
He was taller than she'd imagined, imposing in his black tuxedo. Even from a distance, she could sense the rigidity in his posture, the tension. As she walked closer, forced into a slow, measured pace by her mother's hand on her elbow, she could see his face more clearly. He wasn't looking at her with love or anticipation. He was looking at her with something closer to resignation, like this was a business meeting he'd rather skip. Emily's heart hammered. She reached the altar. Her mother squeezed her hand once before releasing it and stepping back. Emily stood beside Daniel, the veil between them mercifully thick. The priest began speaking. Emily heard none of it. She was hyper-aware of Daniel beside her, of his height, of the expensive cologne she could smell, of the way he held himself perfectly still. When it came time for the vows, Daniel's voice was deep and controlled, each word measured. Emily's voice shook, barely above a whisper. She was grateful for the veil, for the barrier between her face and his scrutiny. The priest pronounced them married. Daniel lifted the veil. For a moment, their eyes met. His were gray, cold as winter sky. Emily saw his brow furrow slightly. A flicker of something. Confusion, perhaps? But then it was gone. He leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, a kiss that was perfunctory, obligatory, lasting barely a second. The small congregation applauded. Emily was now Mrs. Daniel Whitmore. The reception at the Whitmore estate passed in a blur. The house was massive, a colonial revival mansion with towering white columns and manicured gardens. Emily was ushered from room to room, introduced to people whose names she immediately forgot, smiled until her face ached. Daniel barely spoke to her. He stood beside her when required, placed a hand on her lower back during photographs, but his attention was elsewhere, on conversations with his family members, on his phone, which he checked repeatedly. During the dinner, Emily sat beside him at the head table. The food was exquisite. Courses she couldn't identify, but she barely tasted anything. Across the table, Daniel's mother watched her with sharp eyes. A woman in her 60s with perfect posture and a string of pearls that probably cost more than Emily's car. After the meal, Daniel's mother approached Emily while Daniel was occupied with his uncle. She took Emily's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Rebecca," she said, and Emily's stomach dropped before she remembered that was supposedly her name now. "We're so pleased to have you in the family. Daniel needs someone steady, someone who understands the importance of discretion and duty." Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. "I hope you understand what's expected of a Whitmore wife," she continued, his mother's smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Appearances matter. Reputation is everything. I'm sure you and Daniel will have a very practical marriage." Before Emily could respond, Daniel returned and his mother drifted away. As the reception wound down, as guests began to depart, the reality of what came next hit Emily. She would be going home with Daniel, to his house, as his wife. The drive was silent. Daniel's car was a sleek black sedan that smelled like leather and money. He drove with one hand on the wheel, his jaw set, eyes on the road. Emily watched the city slide by, each mile taking her further from her old life. Daniel's house was in Riverside Heights, just as her mother had said, a modern structure of glass and steel nestled among old oak trees. He pulled into the garage, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment. "I'll show you to your room," he said, finally, not looking at her. "Your room, not our room." Inside, the house was all clean lines and expensive furniture, more like a showroom than a home. Daniel led her to the upstairs, down a hallway, and opened a door to his spacious bedroom with an attached bathroom. "You can stay here," he said. "My room is at the other end of the hall. Someone will bring your things tomorrow." Emily nodded, still in her wedding dress, feeling ridiculous and small. Daniel hesitated at the door, his hand on the frame. For a moment, Emily thought he might say something, might acknowledge the strangeness of all this. But he just nodded once and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Emily stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by luxury she'd never imagined, wearing a wedding dress that wasn't meant for her, married to a man who didn't love her, who didn't even know her real name. She walked to the window. Outside, the manicured lawn stretched into darkness. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was free, living whatever life she'd chosen. And Emily was here, a substitute, a stand-in, a placeholder for the woman Daniel had actually wanted to marry. She thought about her parents, their relief, their debt cleared. She thought about her studio apartment, her job at the hotel, her small, simple life. All of it felt impossibly far away now. Emily unpinned the veil from her hair and set it on the dressing. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like someone from a different world, someone living a lie. And she had no idea how long she could keep it up. Emily discovered something in Daniel's study that changes everything she thought she knew about her sister's relationship with him. The truth is darker than abandonment. It's calculated manipulation. The first month passed like a strange silent film. Emily moved through the Whitmore house like a ghost, occupying space but never quite belonging. Daniel left early each morning for his office, often before Emily woke, and returned late, going directly to his study, where he remained until she heard his footsteps padding down the hall to his bedroom well past midnight. They ate together perhaps 3 times in those first 4 weeks, still to dinners where the clink of silverware on china was the loudest sound. Daniel would ask perfunctory questions about her day, and Emily would give vague, brief answers. She quickly learned he wasn't actually listening, was already formulating his next polite inquiry or checking his watch. Emily had quit her job at the hotel. Daniel's mother had made it clear that a Whitmore wife didn't work. Not in that way. Instead, Emily's days stretched empty before her. She explored the house, each room more immaculate than the last, decorated by professionals with no warmth or personality. She discovered Daniel employed a housekeeper who came 3 times a week, a silent woman named Maria, who cleaned around Emily as if she were just another piece of furniture. The isolation was crushing. Emily had no friends in this part of the city, no connections, no purpose. Her parents called weekly asking how she was adjusting, their voices bright with relief that the crisis had been averted. Emily told them everything was fine. What else could she say? She found herself thinking about Rebecca constantly. Where had her sister gone? Why had she run? Rebecca had always been the confident one, the planner, the achiever. Running away didn't fit the sister Emily knew. One afternoon in her 5th week of marriage, Emily found herself standing outside Daniel's study. He was at work. The house was empty except for Maria vacuuming downstairs. The door was closed but not locked. Emily had never gone inside, had respected this as Daniel's private space. But something drew her now, a need to understand the man she'd married, to find some clue about the relationship he'd had with Rebecca, to make sense of this bizarre situation she'd found herself in. She turned the handle and stepped inside. The study was the most personal room in the house. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookcases, a massive desk facing windows that overlook the garden. On the desk sat a laptop, stacks of papers, and a silver-framed photograph. Emily approached slowly. The photograph showed Daniel with Rebecca, taken at what looked like the engagement party. They stood side by side, but not touching. Daniel's expression was neutral, professional. And Rebecca? Emily leaned closer. Rebecca was smiling, but it was the smile Emily recognized from childhood, the one Rebecca used when she was lying, the smile that said she was performing, not feeling. Emily's gaze drifted to the papers on the desk. She knew she shouldn't look, knew this was a violation of privacy, but her hand moved anyway, lifting the corner of a document. It was a contract, specifically a prenuptial agreement. Emily's eyes scanned the dense legal language. The terms were brutal. In the event of divorce, Rebecca would receive nothing unless the marriage lasted at least 5 years. All property remained Daniel's. Any children would be subject to a custody arrangement that heavily favored Daniel. There were clauses about public behavior, social obligations, even specifications about where Rebecca could and couldn't travel without Daniel's approval. This wasn't a marriage contract. It was an employment agreement. Emily's hand shook as she set the document down. Had Rebecca seen this? Of course she had. She would have had to sign it. Is this why she'd run? But something didn't add up. If Rebecca had wanted out, she could have simply called off the wedding. Unless... She opened the desk drawer. Inside was a stack of unopened letters, all addressed to Daniel, in familiar handwriting, Rebecca's handwriting. Emily pulled out the first letter, postmarked 3 weeks before the wedding. Her eyes raced over the words. Daniel, I can't keep doing this. I thought I could, thought the money would be worth it, but I can't. Every time we talk, I feel like I'm suffocating. You're not a bad person, but we both know this isn't real. Please, let's just call it off. We can say it was mutual.
I'll return the money your family gave mine. I'll figure something out. I just can't marry you. Rebecca. Emily's heart pounded. Rebecca had tried to call it off. She grabbed another letter, this one from 2 weeks before the wedding. Daniel, why won't you answer my calls? Your mother came to see me today. She said if I backed out now, your family would sue mine for breach of contract. She said my parents would lose everything. I don't understand why you're doing this. I was honest from the beginning about what I wanted. You said you understood that you wanted the same thing, a practical arrangement. Why has this become a prison? Rebecca. Emily felt sick. She reached for the final letter, sent just 4 days before the wedding. Daniel, this is my last attempt to reach you. I'm begging you. I will do anything to get out of this marriage except go through with it. I'll work for your company for free. I'll sign an NDA. I'll disappear and you can tell people whatever you want about what happened. But I cannot stand at that altar. I cannot promise to spend my life with someone who sees me as an acquisition. Please, if you ever cared about me at all, let me go. The letters were all unopened. Daniel had never read them, or he'd read them and ignored them. Emily sank into Daniel's desk chair, her mind reeling. This changed everything. Rebecca hadn't just run away on a whim. She'd been trapped, backed into a corner by legal agreements and family pressure. And when Daniel refused to release her, she'd taken the only escape route she could find. But why had Daniel pushed for this marriage if Rebecca clearly didn't want it? Nothing about his behavior suggested he was in love with her. He treated Emily with polite indifference, not heartbreak. She heard footsteps on the stairs. Maria. She quickly returned the letters to the drawer and left the study, closing the door silently behind her. Her heart raced as she walked to her bedroom, trying to look casual as Maria passed her in the hallway. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He found Emily in the kitchen, attempting to make dinner despite having no idea what groceries were even in the house. "You don't need to do that," Daniel said, setting his briefcase down. "We can order something." Emily turned to face him, seeing him differently now. "Why did you marry me?" Daniel stilled. It was the most direct thing Emily had said to him in 5 weeks. "Why did you marry me?" he countered. Emily's mind raced. She couldn't tell him the truth. "I asked first." Daniel loosened his tie, regarding her with those cold gray eyes. "My mother thought it was time I married. She selected Rebecca from several candidates. It seemed like a practical arrangement." "Candidates? Like a job interview?" "In a way." Daniel moved to pour himself a drink from the bar cart in the corner. "My family has always approached marriage practically. Love is irrelevant. Compatibility, social standing, the ability to produce heirs and maintain appearances, those matter." The clinical way he spoke made Emily's skin crawl. And Rebecca agreed to this? She approached me at that gala specifically because she'd researched my family's wealth. She was very clear about what she wanted, financial security for herself and her family. I appreciated her honesty. Most women pretend they want romance when really they want access to a bank account. Rebecca was refreshingly direct. Emily forced her voice to stay steady. "Did you love her?" "No." The answer was so immediate, so cold, that Emily almost flinched. "Did she love you?" Emily asked. Daniel's expression didn't change. She said she did eventually. Women usually do develop some level of attachment. It's easier for everyone that way. Emily felt a surge of anger so intense it surprised her. This man had trapped Rebecca in a contract, ignored her pleas to be released, forced her into a marriage she desperately didn't want, and he spoke about it like it was a business merger gone slightly wrong. What if she hadn't? What if I hadn't married you? Emily caught herself, but Daniel didn't seem to notice the slip. "What would you have done?" "Sued your family for breach of contract." He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "They would have lost everything. But that's not relevant now. You made your choice." Emily turned back to the counter, gripping its edge to keep her hands from shaking. She hadn't made a choice. Not really. She'd been manipulated just like Rebecca had been, caught in a web spun by the Whitmore family's money and power and complete lack of empathy.
"I'm going to my room," Emily said quietly. She didn't wait for Daniel's response. As she climbed the stairs, she felt the walls of the house closing in. She was trapped, just like Rebecca had been. The only difference was that Emily had walked into this cage with her eyes open, and she had no idea how to get out. That night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Rebecca's letters, about the desperation in those words. She thought about her own situation, married to a man who saw her as a placeholder for her sister, who saw marriage itself as a transaction. She couldn't stay here. She wouldn't become another possession in Daniel Whitmore's perfectly curated life. But her parents' debt was cleared with Whitmore money. If Emily left, if the marriage fell apart, would Daniel's family demand it back? Would her parents be ruined again? Emily rolled over, frustration building in her chest. She was stuck, completely, utterly stuck. Unless an idea began forming, dangerous and half-formed. If Daniel didn't love Rebecca, if this marriage was purely practical to him, maybe Emily could negotiate. Maybe she could find a way to buy her freedom without destroying her parents. She would need money, she would need leverage, she would need information about the Whitmores that she could use. Emily sat up in bed. She'd spent 5 weeks being passive, floating through this nightmare. But she wasn't Rebecca. She didn't need to run away. She could fight back. She just needed to be smart about it. The next morning, Emily asked Daniel for a credit card. He provided one without question, probably relieved she was finally acting like the wife he'd purchased. Emily began going out, ostensibly shopping, but really exploring the city, meeting with lawyers for consultations about estate planning, asking questions about prenuptial agreements and contract law, learning what her options were. What she discovered was discouraging. The prenup was ironclad. If Emily left within 5 years, she got nothing. If the marriage ended due to her fault, infidelity, abandonment, bringing a scandal to the Whitmore name, she got nothing, and her family could be held liable. But if Daniel initiated the divorce, or if Emily could prove the marriage was void due to fraud, Emily's mind raced. She was living proof of fraud. She wasn't Rebecca. The entire marriage was based on a lie. If that came out, Daniel would have grounds for annulment, and presumably he'd be mortified enough by the scandal that he'd want to handle it quietly without pursuing Emily's family. But using that truth was dangerous. It could backfire spectacularly. Emily spent her afternoons in the public library, researching Daniel's company, his family history, looking for anything she could use. She discovered that Whitmore Industries was in the middle of a major merger, that Daniel's personal reputation was crucial to the deal, that any hint of scandal could cost him millions. This was her leverage. Daniel needed to appear stable, married, respectable. If Emily threatened to expose the truth about their marriage, to create a scandal, he might negotiate to keep her quiet. It was risky, but it was the only plan she had. Emily was in the library, deep in research, when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Emily?" The voice made her blood freeze. "Rebecca!" "Don't hang up," Rebecca said quickly. "I need to talk to you. I know what you did. I know you took my place." Emily's mouth dried. "Where are you?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm coming back." Rebecca's voice was strange, tight with emotion Emily couldn't identify. "I'm bringing proof that Daniel is the father of my baby. I'm pregnant, 3 months along, conceived before the wedding, before I ran." Emily felt the library spin around her. "That's not possible. Daniel said he never—" "Daniel says a lot of things," Rebecca laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm coming back in 3 days, and when I do, I'm going to tell everyone the truth. About you, about me, about this whole sham marriage.
Daniel will have to choose which sister he wants to be married to. And I think we both know it's not going to be you." The line went dead. Emily sat frozen in the library chair, her research forgotten. Rebecca was coming back. Rebecca was pregnant. And Emily's entire world was about to collapse.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Rebecca arrives with her bombshell revelation, but Emily notices inconsistencies in her sister's story. As Daniel's cold facade cracks, Emily realizes she might not be the only one living a lie. Emily drove home in a daze, Rebecca's words echoing in her mind. 3 days. She had 3 days before her sister returned and destroyed the fragile existence Emily had built. Or was it destroying? Maybe Rebecca's return would free her. Maybe Daniel would want to fix this, would choose Rebecca, and Emily could finally go back to her real life. Except she no longer had a real life to go back to. She'd quit her job. Her apartment had been sublet, and the thought of returning to that small, empty studio, of checking in hotel guests at midnight, of being alone again after knowing what it felt like to live in this house, even as a ghost? Emily stopped that train of thought. She didn't want this marriage. She couldn't want this marriage. Daniel was cold, manipulative, treating her like an object he'd purchased. The fact that he was handsome, that sometimes she caught herself watching him read in his study, that occasionally he looked at her with something almost like curiosity before his walls went back up, none of that mattered. When Emily arrived home, Daniel's car was already in the garage, unusual for 3 in the afternoon. She found him in his study, door open, standing at the window with his back to her. "We need to talk," Emily said from the doorway. Daniel turned. His tie was loosened, hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked more human than Emily had ever seen him. "Yes," he said, "we do." Emily stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Rebecca called me." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. What did she want? "She's coming back in 3 days. She says she's pregnant with your child." Now Daniel did react. He turned away sharply, his hand coming up to his face. Emily heard him exhale, a sound of frustration or anger or something else she couldn't identify. "That's impossible," Daniel said finally. "That's what I thought you'd say." Daniel turned back to her, and for the first time since they'd married, he looked directly at Emily, really looked at her. "I never slept with Rebecca, not once." Emily studied his face, searching for deception. "Why should I believe you?" "Because if I had, I wouldn't have gone through with the marriage. My mother arranged everything with Rebecca. They negotiated terms. Part of the agreement was that Rebecca and I would wait until after the wedding for intimacy. My mother's old-fashioned that way. She thought it would ensure Rebecca was serious about the commitment." Emily tried to process this. "So you never—" "We kissed exactly twice, once when I proposed, once at our engagement party. Both were brief and chaste. I realize this makes me sound pathetic. A 32-year-old man who let his mother arrange his marriage and dictate the terms of his relationship. But yes, that's exactly what I am." The bitterness in his voice surprised Emily. She moved closer, leaning against his desk. "Then Rebecca is lying about the baby being yours." "Obviously." "So why would she claim it is? What does she gain?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled open a drawer and withdrew a document. He handed it to Emily. It was the prenuptial agreement she'd seen before, but this time Daniel pointed to a specific clause. Section 7, paragraph 3. "In the event that Rebecca becomes pregnant with my child, she receives a one-time payment of $5 million, regardless of whether the marriage continues." Emily's eyes widened. $5 million? "My mother insisted on that clause. She wants grandchildren. She thought financial incentive would— Doesn't matter. What matters is that if Rebecca can convince people the child is mine, she could claim that money." "But you can prove it's not yours, DNA test," "Which would take weeks to arrange and process. In the meantime, the scandal would be everywhere. My merger would collapse, my family's reputation would be damaged, and Rebecca would disappear again, this time with leverage to demand a settlement to go quietly. Emily sat down in the chair across from him. "This is insane." "Yes." They sat in silence. Emily's mind raced, trying to find a way through this maze. Finally, she asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why me?" Daniel looked up. "What? When Rebecca didn't show up to the wedding, when I took her place, you must have realized I wasn't her. We look similar but not identical. You must have known." Daniel held his gaze. "I did know." Emily, the breath caught. "What?" "I knew you weren't Rebecca the moment I lifted your veil. Rebecca has a small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident. You don't. Your eyes are darker than hers. Your hands are different. You have calluses from work. Rebecca's were always soft." "Then why didn't you stop the ceremony?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Because in that moment I realized I didn't care. Rebecca or Emily, what did it matter? I was marrying a stranger either way. At least you seemed nervous, uncertain. Rebecca had always been too confident, too calculating. You seemed real." Emily didn't know what to say. Daniel continued, his voice taking on an edge. "And then, over these past weeks, watching you wander around this house like a prisoner, barely speaking to me, clearly miserable, I realized you were just as trapped as I am. We're both victims of our family's choices. I thought perhaps we could find some understanding in that. You never said anything. You never did." He was right. Emily had never revealed her true identity, had maintained the charade. They'd both been living this lie together, neither willing to break the silence. "Rebecca's return changes everything. If she reveals you're not who you claim to be, the marriage is void. My family will demand your parents repay everything. They'll sue for fraud." Emily's stomach dropped. "My parents don't have that money anymore." "I know." "So what do we do?" Daniel stood, pacing to the window again. "We could pay Rebecca off, give her enough money to go away and keep quiet. That's extortion." "Yes, but it might be the cleanest solution."
Emily joined him at the window. Outside, the garden was perfect, every hedge trimmed, every flower in its designated place. A controlled, curated beauty with no room for chaos. "I don't want to give her money," Emily said quietly. "She chose to run. She made this mess. Why should she profit from it?" Daniel glanced at her, something like respect in his eyes. "What do you suggest?" Emily thought about the past weeks of research, the information she'd gathered about the Whitmores, about Daniel's business, about leverage and negotiation. An idea formed, dangerous, but possible. "We call her bluff," Emily said quietly. "She claims the baby is yours. We demand a paternity test immediately. No waiting weeks. We pay for the fastest processing available. If she refuses, we expose her lie. If she agrees and it's not your child, we have proof she attempted fraud. And if by some impossible chance it is my child, then you deal with that. But I don't think it is. I think Rebecca got pregnant by someone else and saw an opportunity to manipulate the situation." Emily turned to face Daniel. "The question is whether you're willing to risk the scandal while we wait for the test results." Daniel considered this. "The merger finalizes in 6 weeks. If I can keep the scandal contained until then, I'll be fine. The company will be fine. So we wait for Rebecca to show up, we demand the test, and we maintain appearances until we have proof." "And what about us?" Daniel asked. "What about the fact that you're not actually my wife?" Emery met his eyes. "As long as Rebecca doesn't reveal that, no one has to know. We continue as we have been." "Living as strangers in the same house?" "Yes." Daniel studied her face, and Emily found herself unable to look away. There was something in his expression she hadn't seen before, a crack in the cold facade, a hint of genuine emotion. "I don't want that," Daniel said quietly. Emily's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "These past weeks, I've watched you try to navigate this situation. You've been more honest in your silence than Rebecca ever was in her words. I don't know your real story, Emily. I don't know why you agreed to take Rebecca's place,
but I know you're not here because you wanted to trap me or my money. Emily felt her defenses crumbling. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me. The invitation hung between them. Emily thought about the lies, the secrets, the complicated truth of how she'd ended up here. And for the first time since the wedding, she wanted to tell someone. She wanted to be seen. But before she could speak, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression hardened again. The wall is going back up. My mother is coming for dinner tomorrow night. She wants to meet with you about your duties for an upcoming charity gala. The moment was broken. Emily nodded, stepping back. Of course. That night, Emily lay in bed thinking about Daniel's words. I don't want that. What did he mean? What did he want instead? And more importantly, what did Emily want? She spent 6 weeks focused on escape, on finding a way out of this marriage. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped noticing how Daniel's eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. She'd stopped acknowledging the flutter in her chest when they accidentally touched passing in the hallway. She'd stopped admitting that living in this house had become less about endurance and more about anticipation, waiting for those rare moments when Daniel's mask slipped and she glimpsed the person underneath. Emily pressed her hands to her face. This was insane. She couldn't develop feelings for Daniel. He was cold, controlling, had forced Rebecca into this arrangement. He'd known Emily wasn't his intended bride and married her anyway. But he was also honest with her today, vulnerable even. In the way he'd looked at her? Emily rolled over, frustrated with herself. In 3 days, Rebecca would arrive, and this would all be over. There was no point in analyzing her confusing feelings for Daniel when their entire situation was built on lies and desperation. She needed to stay focused. She needed to survive Rebecca's return. Everything else was a distraction. The next day passed in tense preparation. Maria prepared an elaborate dinner. Daniel came home early and changed into a suit. Emily wore one of the designer dresses that had appeared in her closet over the past weeks, part of the wardrobe Daniel's mother had arranged for her. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore arrived at 7 p.m. sharp, sweeping into the house like she owned it, which Emily supposed in many ways she did. She was accompanied by a younger man Emily didn't recognize, someone who looked vaguely familiar. Rebecca, darling, she said, kissing the air beside Emily's cheeks. You look lovely. I want you to meet Marcus Chen. He's the attorney handling Daniel's merger. Marcus extended his hand. He was in his early 30s, attractive in a polished way, with dark hair and sharp eyes. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Whitmore. As Emily shook his hand, something nagged at her. She had seen his face before, but where? Dinner was an exercise in performance. Eleanor dominated the conversation, discussing the upcoming charity gala, the expectations for Emily's behavior, the importance of presenting a united front during Daniel's business negotiations. Emily smiled and nodded, playing the role of obedient wife. Marcus watched her throughout the meal with an intensity that made Emily uncomfortable. When Eleanor excused herself to take a phone call, Marcus leaned toward Emily. I have to say, Mrs. Whitmore, you're not quite what I expected. Daniel stiffened beside her. What do you mean? Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just that Rebecca was always so animated when we met before. You seem more subdued tonight. Emily's blood got cold. Marcus had met Rebecca before. He would know Emily wasn't Rebecca. People change after marriage, Daniel said coolly, as I am sure you're aware. Of course. Marcus took a sip of wine, still watching Emily, though usually not quite so dramatically. The rest of the dinner was torture. Emily felt Marcus's gaze on her constantly, assessing, questioning. When Eleanor finally announced that it was time to leave, Emily barely suppressed her relief. But as Marcus was walking out, he paused by Emily. I'll be handling all the legal documentation for the merger, which means I'll be around quite a bit in the next few weeks. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, Rebecca. The way he said her sister's name made it clear. He knew. Or at least he suspected strongly. After they left, Daniel found Emily in the kitchen, gripping the counter with shaking hands. He knows, Emily whispered. He knows I'm not Rebecca. Daniel was beside her in an instant. He suspects. He doesn't know for certain.
He met her before. He'll tell your mother. He won't. Daniel's voice was firm. Marcus is ambitious. If he creates a scandal that derails the merger, it damages his reputation too. He'll keep quiet until after the deal closes.
And then we'll deal with it. Emily looked up at him, and suddenly they were very close. Daniel's hand on her arm, his gray eyes intense and focused entirely on her. The air between them felt charged, heavy, with things unsaid. "Why are you protecting me?" Emily asked. "You could end this right now. Tell everyone the truth, get the marriage annulled, and destroy your family in the process. You don't care about my family. You were willing to sue Rebecca's family for breach of contract." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That was before." "Before what?" "Before I knew you." The words hit Emily like a physical force. Before she could respond, Daniel stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Rebecca arrives tomorrow," he said, his voice controlled again. "We need to be ready." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the evening, Marcus's knowing looks, Daniel's words. "Before I knew you." What did that mean? What did any of this mean? At 2 a.m., Emily gave up on sleep and went downstairs to get water. She found Daniel in his study, still dressed, staring at his computer screen. "Can't sleep either?" Emily asked from the doorway. He looked up, surprised. "No." Emily entered, sitting in the chair across from his desk. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "Tell me about Rebecca," Emily said finally. "Tell me what she was really like." Daniel leaned back, calculating, charming when it suited her. She knew exactly what to say to make people like her, trust her. But it was all performance. "I don't think I ever saw the real Rebecca." "You must have felt something for her, to agree to marry her." "I felt nothing. That was the appeal. No risk of actual emotion complicating the arrangement." "And now?" "Now everything is complicated." Emily's breath caught. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. She should leave, should go back to her room, should maintain the distance they had carefully constructed. Instead, she stayed. "I was working at a hotel when my mother called. I was nobody, a receptionist on the night shift. And suddenly I was supposed to be your wife, supposed to fit into this world I didn't understand. You've managed better than you think." "I'm terrified every day. Terrified someone will notice I don't know which fork to use, or that I've never been to the opera, or that I have no idea what to say at these dinners with your mother. Those things don't matter. They mattered to your world." He stood, moving around the dusk to stand in front of her. "You want to know the truth? The first night, after the wedding, I stood outside your door for 10 minutes. Emily looked up at him, her heart racing. "Why?" "Because I knew you were probably crying. I knew you were alone and scared, and I didn't know what to do. I've never been good at emotions, at connection. My mother raised me to see everything as a transaction. Marriage, relationships, even family. It's all about duty and maintaining appearances. But standing outside your door, hearing you cry, I felt something I'd never felt before." "What?" "Guilty. I felt guilty for putting you in that situation, for not stopping the wedding when I realized you weren't Rebecca, for being so desperate for some kind of order in my life that I didn't care who got hurt." Emily stood, and now they were inches apart. "You didn't force me. I made a choice." "Did you? Or were you backed into a corner like everyone else in this mess?" Emily thought about her parents' debt, about Rebecca's desperate letters, about all the ways the Whitmore family's money had trapped everyone around them. "Maybe we were both backed into corners," she said softly. Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, questioning. Emily's eyes fluttered closed. "Emily?" he whispered, and hearing him say her real name made something break open in her chest. They moved toward each other at the same time, the kiss inevitable and electric and nothing like the perfunctory press of lips at their wedding. This was real, desperate, months of tension finally finding release. Emily's hands fisted in Daniel's shirt, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, and Emily felt herself falling into it, into him, into the dangerous territory of actual feeling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This is
Terrible idea. The worst, Emily agreed, but neither of them moved away. Rebecca comes tomorrow, Daniel said. I know. Everything could fall apart. I know. Daniel pulled back enough to look at her. I don't want to lose you. Emily's heart clenched. You never had me. This isn't real, isn't it? The question hung between them. Emily thought about the past 6 weeks, about the slowly building connection she'd been denying, about the way Daniel looked at her like she was the only person in the world that mattered. I don't know what this is, but I know I'm tired of pretending I don't feel anything. Daniel kissed her again, softer this time, tender. When he pulled away, he took her hand.
He met her before. He'll tell your mother. He won't. Daniel's voice was firm. Marcus is ambitious. If he creates a scandal that derails the merger, it damages his reputation too. He'll keep quiet until after the deal closes. And then we'll deal with it. Emily looked up at him, and suddenly they were very close. Daniel's hand on her arm, his gray eyes intense and focused entirely on her. The air between them felt charged, heavy, with things unsaid. Why are you protecting me? Emily asked. You could end this right now. Tell everyone the truth, get the marriage annulled, and destroy your family in the process. You don't care about my family. You were willing to sue Rebecca's family for breach of contract. Daniel's jaw tightened. That was before. Before what? Before I knew you. The words hit Emily like a physical force. Before she could respond, Daniel stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Rebecca arrives tomorrow, he said, his voice controlled again. We need to be ready. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the evening, Marcus's knowing looks, Daniel's words. Before I knew you. What did that mean? What did any of this mean? At 2 a.m., Emily gave up on sleep and went downstairs to get water. She found Daniel in his study, still dressed, staring at his computer screen. Can't sleep either? Emily asked from the doorway. He looked up, surprised. No. Emily entered, sitting in the chair across from his desk. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Tell me about Rebecca, Emily said finally. Tell me what she was really like. Daniel leaned back, calculating, charming when it suited her. She knew exactly what to say to make people like her, trust her. But it was all performance. I don't think I ever saw the real Rebecca. You must have felt something for her, to agree to marry her. I felt nothing. That was the appeal. No risk of actual emotion complicating the arrangement. And now? Now everything is complicated. Emily's breath caught. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. She should leave, should go back to her room, should maintain the distance they had carefully constructed. Instead, she stayed. I was working at a hotel when my mother called. I was nobody, a receptionist on the night shift. And suddenly I was supposed to be your wife, supposed to fit into this world I didn't understand. You've managed better than you think. I'm terrified every day. Terrified someone will notice I don't know which fork to use, or that I've never been to the opera, or that I have no idea what to say at these dinners with your mother. Those things don't matter. They mattered to your world. He stood, moving around the dusk to stand in front of her. You want to know the truth. The first night, after the wedding, I stood outside your door for 10 minutes. Emily looked up at him, her heart racing. Why? Because I knew you were probably crying. I knew you were alone and scared, and I didn't know what to do. I've never been good at emotions, at connection. My mother raised me to see everything as a transaction. Marriage, relationships, even family. It's all about duty and maintaining appearances. But standing outside your door, hearing you cry, I felt something I'd never felt before. What? Guilty. I felt guilty for putting you in that situation, for not stopping the wedding when I realized you weren't Rebecca, for being so desperate for some kind of order in my life that I didn't care who got hurt. Emily stood, and now they were inches apart. You didn't force me. I made a choice. Did you?
Or were you backed into a corner like everyone else in this mess? Emily thought about her parents' debt, about Rebecca's desperate letters, about all the ways the Whitmore family's money had trapped everyone around them. Maybe we were both backed into corners, she said softly. Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, questioning. Emily's eyes fluttered closed. "Emily?" he whispered, and hearing him say her real name made something break open in her chest. They moved toward each other at the same time, the kiss inevitable and electric and nothing like the perfunctory press of lips at their wedding. This was real, desperate, months of tension finally finding release. Emily's hands fisted in Daniel's shirt, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, and Emily felt herself falling into it, into him, into the dangerous territory of actual feeling. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea." "The worst," Emily agreed, but neither of them moved away. "Rebecca comes tomorrow," Daniel said. "I know. Everything could fall apart. I know." Daniel pulled back enough to look at her. "I don't want to lose you." Emily's heart clenched. "You never had me. This isn't real, isn't it?" The question hung between them. Emily thought about the past 6 weeks, about the slowly building connection she'd been denying, about the way Daniel looked at her like she was the only person in the world that mattered. "I don't know what this is, but I know I'm tired of pretending I don't feel anything." Daniel kissed her again, softer this time, tender. When he pulled away, he took her hand.
The truth about Rebecca and Marcus's relationship exposes a conspiracy that goes deeper than anyone imagined, one that threatens to destroy both Daniel's business and Emily's new life. Emily sank into a chair across from Rebecca, her mind reeling. Daniel remained standing, his expression dangerously calm, in the way that Emily had learned meant he was furious. "You have 5 minutes," Daniel said coldly. "Then I'm calling security and having you both escorted out." Marcus raised his hands. "Please, just hear us out." Rebecca's voice was shaky when she spoke. "I never wanted any of this. The engagement, the arrangement with your family, it was all my parents' idea. They were drowning in debt, and your mother approached them with this opportunity. I was supposed to marry you, secure your family money, and save my family from ruin." "I know all this already," Daniel said impatiently. "But you don't know that I was already in love with someone else." Rebecca's hand found Marcus's. "I'd been with Marcus for 2 years. We were planning to get married. And then my parents told me about their debt, about the arrangement with your family, and they begged me to do this." Emily leaned forward. "So you agreed to marry Daniel while dating Marcus?" "I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just a business arrangement, that Daniel wouldn't care about love or fidelity. But then I met Daniel, and I realized he was a real person, and what I was doing was cruel. And when I found out I was pregnant with Marcus's baby," Rebecca's voice broke, "I couldn't go through with the wedding." "So you ran," Emily said. "I tried to call it off properly. I sent letters to Daniel, tried to reach him, but his mother intercepted everything. She told me if I didn't show up to that wedding, she'd destroy my family legally and financially. She'd make sure my parents lost everything, that they'd end up homeless." Daniel's expression flickered. "My mother wouldn't—" "Your mother absolutely would," Marcus interrupted. "I've been her attorney for 3 years, Daniel. I've seen what she's done to people who cross her. She's ruthless." Daniel sank into a chair, looking suddenly exhausted. "Why didn't you come to me directly?" "Because you never answered my calls. Every time I tried, I got your assistant or your mother. And Marcus," Rebecca looked at him, "Marcus was handling your family's legal affairs. He couldn't openly oppose your mother without losing his career." Emily's mind raced through the implications. "So on the wedding day, you ran because it was the only option you saw." "Yes. I know it was cowardly. I know I left you holding the disaster I created. But I was desperate and scared, and
Rebecca's eyes met Emily's. "I never imagined Mom and Dad would ask you to take my place." The sisters stared at each other across the table. Emily saw genuine remorse in Rebecca's eyes, but also something else. Calculation. Why come back now? You got away. You and Marcus could have just disappeared together. Rebecca and Marcus exchanged a glance. Marcus spoke. "Because of what Eleanor is planning." Daniel straightened. "What are you talking about?" Marcus pulled out a tablet, opening a file. "For the past 2 months, I've been documenting Eleanor's activities related to your merger. Daniel, your mother has been systematically undermining the deal." "That's impossible. She wants this deal. She's been pushing for it." "She wants you to fail," Marcus said bluntly. "If the merger collapses, you'll be blamed. Your reputation will be destroyed. And then she can force you out of the company and install your cousin Richard as CEO." Daniel's face went white. "Richard? He's barely competent." "But he's loyal to Eleanor. He'll run the company exactly how she wants." Marcus turned the tablet toward Daniel. "I have emails, memos, recorded calls. Eleanor has been feeding confidential information to your merger rival. She's been arranging for suppliers to break their contracts. She's orchestrating the entire collapse." Emily felt sick. Why would she do that to her own son? "Because I wouldn't let her control my life anymore," Daniel said quietly. 6 months ago, I told her I was making my own decisions about the company. She smiled and said she understood. But this, he gestured at the tablet, this is her revenge." Rebecca leaned forward. "Marcus came to me a month ago with this information. We realized that if the merger fails, Daniel will be vulnerable. Eleanor will destroy him professionally and personally. And in the chaos, she'll go after anyone connected to him, including Emily's family." Emily's stomach dropped. "My parents?" "They accepted Whitmore money under fraudulent pretenses, or at least that's how Eleanor will frame it. She'll sue them into oblivion as part of her campaign to discredit you." Daniel's hands were shaking. Emily reached out instinctively, covering his hand with hers. He gripped it like a lifeline. "So you came to warn us," Emily said to Rebecca. "We came to help stop her." Rebecca's voice was firmer now. "But to do that, we need to work together, all of us." Daniel looked up. "How?" Marcus closed the tablet. "The merger finalizes in 4 weeks. If we can keep Eleanor from sabotaging the final negotiations, the deal goes through. Once you have controlling interest in the combined company, Eleanor loses her leverage. She can't remove you." "But she'll still have the board on her side." "Not if we expose what she's been doing. I have enough evidence to prove she's been acting against the company's interests. The board will have to side with you or face legal liability themselves." It sounded almost too simple. Emily found the flaw immediately. "Eleanor knows Marcus is Rebecca's boyfriend. She'll never trust him now. And she'll be watching Daniel too closely for him to make any moves." "That's where you come in," Rebecca said, looking at Emily. "Eleanor trusts you. Or rather, she trusts Rebecca. She thinks she has you controlled, that you're this meek little wife who'll do whatever she's told." Emily felt a chill. "You want me to spy on her?" "We want you to help us gather the final pieces of evidence we need," Marcus corrected. "Eleanor keeps her most sensitive documents at the house. In Daniel's father's old office, the one she's kept locked since he died. We need access to that room." Daniel shook his head. "Absolutely not. I'm not putting Emily at risk." "I'll do it," Emily said. Everyone looked at her. Daniel's grip on her hand tightened. "Emily, no! If my mother finds out—" "She won't." Emily's voice was steady, even as her heart raced. "Rebecca's right. Eleanor thinks I'm controllable. She won't suspect me." "Why would you do this?" Emily said to Rebecca. And she heard the real question underneath. "Why would you help me after you ruined my life?" Emily saw there her sister, seeing the fear and desperation and love for Marcus that had driven all of Rebecca's choices. She thought about her own growing feelings for Daniel and about how far she'd go to protect him. "Because we're family," Emily said simply. and because no one else should be trapped by the Whitmore's games. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Emily, for everything. Save the apologies for when this is over. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Marcus had identified 3 specific documents they needed from Eleanor's locked office: contracts with the rival company, emails detailing the sabotage, and Eleanor's actual plan for removing Daniel from the company. With those documents, they'd have irrefutable proof of her betrayal.
The challenge was access. Eleanor kept the office key on a chain around her neck. The office had an old-fashioned lock, no electronic systems, which meant they couldn't hack it. Someone would need to physically take the key, make a copy, and return it without Eleanor noticing. Emily volunteered. Eleanor had invited her for lunch the following day to discuss charity gala preparations. It would be the perfect opportunity. As they prepared to leave the hotel, Rebecca pulled Emily aside. "You love him," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Emily didn't bother denying it. "Yes. And he loves you. I saw the way he looks at you. He never looked at me that way." "Rebecca, I'm glad." Rebecca squeezed Emily's hand. "I'm glad he found someone real, and I'm glad that that someone is you. You deserve this, Emily. You deserve to be happy." Emily felt tears threaten. We might lose everything. Or we might win everything. Either way, we face it together, both of us. The sisters hugged, and for the first time in years, Emily felt close to Rebecca again. Not as rivals or as the successful sister and the struggling sister, but as equals, as allies. Driving home, Daniel's quiet. Emily watched him, seeing the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. "You're angry," she said. "I'm terrified." Daniel's voice was raw. "My mother is capable of anything, Emily. If she finds out what you're doing, she won't. You don't know that." Daniel pulled the car over right there on the side of the road. He turned to Emily, his gray eyes intense. "I can't lose you," he said. "I know we started this as a sham, as a convenient arrangement, but somewhere along the way this became real for me. You became real, and the thought of you in danger because of my family—" Emily kissed him, cutting off his words. When she pulled back, she cupped his face in her hands. "I'm choosing this," she said. "I'm choosing you. That means fighting for our life together. That means not letting your mother destroy what we're building." "What are we building?" "I don't know yet, but I want the chance to find out." Daniel pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear. They stayed there on the side of the road, 2 people caught in a web of lies and manipulation, trying to carve out something true. The next day, Emily dressed carefully for lunch with Eleanor. She wore a conservative dress, styled her hair the way Eleanor preferred, practiced looking demure and obedient in the mirror. Daniel kissed her before she left, a kiss that lasted longer than necessary, that said everything they couldn't put into words. "Be careful," he whispered. "Always am." Emily met Eleanor at the Ivy, an exclusive restaurant where Eleanor held court. The older woman was already seated, perfectly coiffed, smiling that cold smile Emily had come to recognize as her version of pleasantness. "Rebecca, darling, you look lovely." They ordered salads, neither would eat, and discussed the charity gala. Eleanor laid out her expectations. Emily would attend, would smile, would say nothing controversial, would be a perfect ornament on Daniel's arm. "I know my son can be difficult," Eleanor said, sipping her wine. "Remote, cold, he gets that from his father. But you're doing wonderfully with him. He seems almost happy lately." Emily forced a smile. "I'm glad. And you're settling into the family nicely. I was worried at first. You seem so different after the wedding. But I see now that marriage has matured you." The irony was suffocating. Eleanor had no idea she was complimenting Emily's performance, praising her for being someone else entirely. Emily's chance came when Eleanor excused herself to take a phone call. She left her purse on the table, the keychain partially visible. Emily's heart hammered as she reached across, fingers closing around the keys. They felt impossibly heavy. A waitress approached. Emily pulled her hand back, pulse racing. "Can I get you anything?" the waitress asked. "Just water, thank you." The waitress left. Emily tried again, managing to unhook the office key from the chain. She slipped it into her purse just as Eleanor returned. The rest of lunch was torture. Every moment Emily expected Eleanor to notice the missing key, to realize what Emily had done. But Eleanor just continued talking about the gala, about expectations, about maintaining the Whitmore reputation. Emily barely heard any of it. The key burned in her pocket like a brand.
After lunch, she drove directly to the locksmith Marcus had recommended. The man barely looked at her, just made 2 copies of the key quickly and efficiently. Emily paid in cash and left. She met Marcus in a parking garage downtown. He was alone, Rebecca waiting safely elsewhere. "You got it?" Marcus asked. Emily handed him 1 copy of the key. "The office is on the 2nd floor, east wing, but I don't know Eleanor's schedule. I don't know when it'll be safe to go in. Leave that to me. I'll figure out when she'll be away from the house long enough." Marcus pocketed the key. "You did good, Emily. This is the break we needed." That evening, Emily had to return the original key to Eleanor's keychain. Daniel created a distraction, calling his mother with a fake emergency about a business dinner. While Eleanor was occupied in her study at the Whitmore mansion, Emily slipped into her bedroom and returned the key to her purse. It was done. Phase 1 complete. But as Emily left Eleanor's room, she saw something that made her blood freeze. On Eleanor's desk, partially hidden under some papers, was a photograph, recent judging by the quality. It showed Rebecca and Marcus together, Marcus's hand on Rebecca's pregnant belly, both of them smiling. Eleanor knew. Eleanor had known all along that Rebecca was alive, that she was with Marcus, that she was pregnant. Which meant everything. Rebecca's return, Marcus's offer to help. This entire plan could be a trap. Emily's hands shook as she backed out of the room. She found Daniel in the hallway. "We need to leave," she whispered urgently. "Now." They made excuses and drove home in tense silence. Once safely in Daniel's study, Emily told him what she'd seen. Daniel's face went pale. "She's been playing us from the beginning. But why? What does she gain from this?" Daniel paced, thinking, if we move against her based on Marcus's evidence, she can claim we fabricated it, that we are conspiring with Marcus and Rebecca to undermine her. She becomes the victim, we become the villains, trying to commit corporate espionage. So the documents in her office might be plants, fake evidence meant to incriminate us when we steal them. Emily sank into a chair. They had been so focused on stopping Eleanor, they'd walked right into her trap. "We need to warn Rebecca and Marcus," Emily said. But when they called, neither answered. Emily tried again and again. Nothing. A text came through from Rebecca's number. "Thanks for the key. Mother sends her regards. R." But it wasn't from Rebecca. The phrasing was all wrong. Eleanor had them. Daniel's phone rang, his mother's name on the screen. He answered on speaker. "Daniel, darling," Eleanor's voice was pleasant, almost cheerful. "I think it's time we had a family meeting, all of us, including your interesting wife. Come to the mansion tomorrow at noon, and do bring Emily, the real Emily, not whatever version she's been pretending to be." The line went dead. Emily looked at Daniel, fear and determination warring in her chest. "She knows everything," Emily whispered. Yes, Daniel's jaw was set, but we're not done yet. Tomorrow we face her, together. And if we lose, then we lose together. But Emily, I swear to you, I will not let her destroy you. Whatever happens, I protect you first. Emily leaned into him, and they held each other in the gathering darkness, 2 people who'd started as strangers, who'd found something real in the midst of lies, who now had to fight for their chance at a future. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation. Eleanor had shown her hand. Now it was time for Emily and Daniel to show theirs.
Eleanor Whitmore sat at the head of the long mahogany table in the mansion's formal dining room, looking every bit the queen presiding over her court. Rebecca and Marcus sat to her right, both looking exhausted and defeated. To Eleanor's left were 2 men Emily didn't recognize, lawyers, judging by their identical expensive suits and leather briefcases. Daniel and Emily entered together, and Emily felt Eleanor's cold gaze assess them. For once, Emily didn't try to hide behind a demure smile. She met Eleanor's eyes directly. "Thank you for joining us," Eleanor said, her tone suggesting she was doing them a favor rather than summoning them. "Please, sit." Emily and Daniel sat across from Rebecca. Emily tried to catch her sister's eye, but Rebecca was staring at the table, Marcus's hand gripping hers tightly. "I suppose you're wondering why I've gathered you all here," Eleanor began, "though I suspect you know. You've all been quite busy lately. Sneaking around, making plans, stealing keys, gathering evidence."
Eleanor smiled, a predator's smile. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Daniel's voice was controlled. What do you want, Mother? What I've always wanted. What's best for this family? What's best for the Whitmore legacy? Eleanor folded her hands on the table. You've become reckless, Daniel, marrying a stranger who isn't who she claims to be. Risking everything I've built for what? Some misguided notion of independence? You were sabotaging my merger. I was protecting our family's interests. That merger would have given you too much power, too much autonomy. You're not ready for that responsibility. I'm 32 years old. When will I be ready? When I'm 50, 60, or never because you can't bear to let go of control? Eleanor's expression didn't change. This isn't about control. This is about duty, about understanding that individual desires are secondary to family legacy. Emily had been silent, but now she spoke. Is that why you trapped Rebecca into an engagement? Why you threatened her family when she tried to escape? Because of duty? Eleanor's gaze shifted to Emily, and for the first time, Emily saw genuine emotion there. Anger. You don't get to speak about duty, Miss Thompson. You committed fraud. You impersonated your sister, deceived my son, and entered into a marriage under false pretenses. That's a crime. A crime you benefit from, because the real Rebecca would have fought you, would have exposed your manipulation, but you thought I'd be easier to control. And you were, until you weren't. Eleanor gestured to one of the lawyers. Mr. Hayes here has prepared several documents. Annulment papers for Daniel and Emily's fraudulent marriage, a lawsuit against the Thompson family for fraud and breach of contract, and criminal charges for theft and corporate espionage against Mr. Chen. Marcus spoke for the first time. I'm your attorney. I have attorney-client privilege. You've been conspiring against me. That negates privilege. All of you will sign the documents I've prepared. You'll accept the consequences of your actions, or I will destroy everyone in this room, legally and financially. Your families will be ruined, your reputations will be demolished, and you'll have nothing. Silence fell over the table. Emily felt Daniel tense beside her. This was it. Eleanor's final play. Sign away their futures or lose everything. Emily thought about her parents, about the debt that would fall on them again. She thought about Rebecca and Marcus, about their unborn child. She thought about Daniel, about the life they'd barely begun to build. And then she thought about the woman sitting across from her, so certain of her power, so convinced that money and threats could control everyone around her. No, Emily said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Excuse me? Eleanor's eyebrows raised. No, I'm not signing anything, and neither is anyone else in this room. Daniel's hand found Emily's under the table, squeezing in support. Eleanor laughed, a cold sound. You think you have a choice? I think you've been playing a game with incomplete information. Emily pulled out her phone, setting it on the table. See, while you were busy setting traps for us, we were doing something you didn't expect. Emily pressed play on a video file. The screen showed Eleanor's office, the locked room, filmed from a hidden camera. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago, before Emily had even taken the key. The video showed Eleanor on the phone, pacing. Yes, I want the merger to fail. I don't care what it costs. Daniel needs to learn that he can't operate independently. Once he's humiliated, once the board loses confidence, Richard takes over. No, Daniel won't suspect me. He thinks I'm supporting him. The video continued, showing Eleanor meeting with Daniel's business rival, showing her handing over confidential documents, showing her plotting every step of the sabotage Marcus had discovered. Eleanor's face had gone white. Where did you get that? From someone you underestimated, Daniel said. He nodded to Marcus. Marcus spoke, his voice steady. I've been documenting your actions for 6 months, Eleanor. Not just recording calls, though I have dozens of those.
I've been collecting emails, financial records, testimony from people you've manipulated over the years. I have everything. You're my attorney. That's privileged. I'm the company's attorney. My duty is to the corporation and its shareholders, not to you personally. And when an individual, even a board member, acts against the company's interests, I'm obligated to report it. Eleanor turned to the lawyers beside her. Mr. Hayes, this is inadmissible. You can argue attorney-client privilege. But the lawyers were already closing their briefcases, standing to leave. Mrs. Whitmore, we were retained under the impression that you were acting in the company's best interests. If these recordings are legitimate, then we can't represent you in this matter. It would be unethical. You're fired, Eleanor snapped. We quit, Hayes replied smoothly. You'll be hearing from our firm about returning your retainer. The lawyers left. Eleanor sat alone at the head of the table, her perfect composure finally cracking. She looked older suddenly, smaller. You can't do this, she said, and her voice shook for the first time. I built this company. I saved it when your father was dying, Daniel. I sacrificed everything for this family. You controlled everything, Daniel corrected, his voice sad rather than angry. There's a difference, Mother. Sacrifice means giving something up. You never gave up anything. You just took. From me, from Father, from everyone around you. I made you who you are. Without me, you'd be nothing. Without you, I'd be free. The words hung in the air. I saw the pain flash across Eleanor's face, saw the woman behind the armor of control and manipulation. For just a moment, she almost felt sorry for her. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. You resign from the board. You transfer your shares to me. You step away from Whitmore Industries completely, and you never interfere in my life, personal or professional, again. And if I refuse, then Marcus takes his evidence to the board and the authorities. You'll be removed, possibly face charges for corporate sabotage. The scandal will destroy the Whitmore name, the thing you care about more than anything. Eleanor stared at the documents, her hands trembling slightly. You really do this to your own mother? You did this to yourself. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor reached for a pen. Her signature was shaky, nothing like her usual bold flourish. When she was done, she stood, gathering what remained of her dignity. You'll regret this, she said to Daniel. All of you will. Without my guidance, you'll fail. The company will collapse, and you'll realize too late that you needed me. Goodbye, Mother, Daniel said quietly. Eleanor looked at each of them in turn. Daniel, Emily, Rebecca, Marcus. Then she walked out, her heels clicking on the marble floor, the sound growing fainter until it disappeared entirely.
No one spoke for a long moment. Then Rebecca started crying, quiet tears of relief. Marcus held her, whispering reassurances. Daniel just stared at the empty doorway where his mother had been. Emily reached for his hand. Are you okay? I don't know. Daniel's voice was hollow. I just destroyed my relationship with my mother. Cut her out of my life. Our lives. She gave you no choice. I know, but it's still... Daniel trailed off, unable to finish. Emily understood, even justified, even necessary. Some actions left scars. Daniel had just severed the primary relationship of his life, had stood up to the woman who shaped him, controlled him, defined him. It was freedom, yes, but freedom came with a cost. Rebecca wiped her eyes. What about us? The lawsuit, the fraud charges? Daniel pulled out another document. Dropped. All of it. As part of the agreement, Mother can't pursue any legal action against anyone in this room. And the marriage? Emily asked quietly. Our marriage. Daniel turned to look at her. Really look at her. That's up to you. Emily's heart raced. What do you mean? I want you to stay. I want this marriage to be real. But Emily, you're free now. Truly free. My mother can't hurt you or your family. You don't have to stay out of obligation or fear. So I'm asking, what do you want? Everyone was watching them. Emily felt the weight of the moment, the magnitude of the choice in front of her. She could walk away. She could go back to her old life, or start a new one entirely. She owed Daniel nothing. But as she looked at him, this complicated, damaged man who'd been honest with her, who'd protected her, who'd chosen her over and over again, she realized she owed herself something. She owed herself the chance to find out what this could become. I want to stay, Emily said, but not as your wife. Not yet. Daniel's expression flickered with confusion and hurt. Emily continued quickly. I want us to start over. Really start over. Not as strangers forced into marriage, but as two people choosing to get to know each other. I want us to date, Daniel. To court. To build something real without all the lies and pressure. Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes, followed by something Emily had never seen before. Hope. You want to date your own husband? I want to date you. And then, maybe, someday, we get married again. Properly, this time. Because we both want it. Not because we're trapped. A smile tugged at Daniel's lips. The first, genuine smile Emily had ever seen from him. That's the most ridiculous, impractical thing I've ever heard. Is that a yes? That's absolutely a yes. Rebecca laughed, the sound bright and relieved. You two are insane. Says the woman who ran away from her own wedding. Emily shot back, but she was smiling. Marcus stood, helping Rebecca to her feet. We should go. Let you two figure out whatever this is. Rebecca paused beside Emily, pulling her into a hug. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. For being brave when I couldn't be. For protecting our family. For being the sister I never deserved. You deserved better than what you got. We both did. But maybe now we can both have it. Rebecca and Marcus left, promising to stay in touch, to include Emily and Daniel in the baby's life. Emily watched them go, feeling a weight lift that she hadn't known she was carrying. Her relationship with Rebecca had been healed, or at least was beginning to heal. She turned to find Daniel watching her. So, when does this dating begin? How about now? Emily smiled. I believe the traditional first date involves dinner and conversation, and since we've been living together for weeks, we probably know each other better than most people on a first date. Or worse, depending on perspective. Daniel moved closer. Fair warning, I am terrible at dating. I've never actually done it. Neither have I, really. We'll figure it out together. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. Emily Thompson, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I would love to, Daniel Whitlaw. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. One question, Daniel said. Where exactly do I take my wife on a first date when we live in the same house? Emily laughed. That's a fair point, although technically you should probably move out, take an apartment, do this properly. Absolutely not. I'm not leaving you alone in this house. It's too big, too empty. Unless you want me to go. Emily considered. No, I like having you here. But maybe we establish some boundaries. Separate rooms, separate spaces. We take this slow. Slow, right? Daniel nodded seriously. Then his eyes sparkled with mischief. How slow are we talking? Because last night, Emily swatted his arm. Last night was before we decided to start over. New rules now. Harsh, but fair. Daniel took her hand. Come on, I know exactly where to take you for our first date. He led her out to his car. They drove through the city as evening fell, ending up at a small restaurant in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just a family-owned Italian place with checkered tablecloths and warm lighting. I used to come here as a kid, before my father died, before my mother took over everything. Dad would bring me here on Saturdays,
We'd eat pasta and talk about normal things. Baseball, school, books. It was the only time he seemed to relax, to not be a Whitmore. Emily reached across the table, taking his hand. "Tell me about him, your father." And he did. Over pasta and wine, he told about a man who'd been gentle and kind, who'd loved architecture and classical music, who'd been slowly crushed under the weight of family expectations until a heart attack ended his suffering. Emily shared her own stories about her parents, about growing up in Rebecca's shadow, about her dreams of studying literature, of maybe teaching someday. They talked until the restaurant was closing, until they were the last customers, until the owner came out personally to tell them he was locking up, but they were welcome back any time. Driving home, Emily felt lighter than she had in months. This, sitting beside Daniel, talking about real things, laughing together, this was what she'd been missing. This was what a relationship should feel like. At the house, Daniel walked Emily to her bedroom door. He hesitated there, clearly wanting to kiss her, but uncertain about the new boundaries. Emily solved the problem by kissing him first, a long, slow kiss that made her toes curl. "Good night, Daniel," she whispered against his lips. "Good night, Emily." She went into her room, closing the door, then immediately opened it again. Daniel was still standing there, looking adorably confused. "Second date tomorrow?" Emily asked. His smile was brilliant. "Definitely."
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.